Hello everyone. In this video, I dive deeply into the current Jupiter Saturn Square. I cover many details, so check out the time signatures below to see all the topics that I cover. I start with an overview of the transits, looking at the three different squares these planets will share with each other. Then I speak to the nature of each of these planets individually, the meaning of their relationship archetypally as a whole, and then the specific meaning of each of them squaring each other in the signs that they're in. Before we jump in, a couple of announcements. For those that appreciate these teachings and want to dive more deeply, I have many classes, class series, and self-study courses available on my classes page. I'm also always available for one-on-one sessions in service to your soul growth. I work with individuals, with couples, and I am also available for long-term soul-to-soul companionship sessions. I am no longer offering the Neptune class series. For now, I'm postponing that indefinitely, probably until the end of the year. For those that have been following, I've been doing a weekly live stream on aspects to Neptune. There's just a lot that I'm needing to give attention to in my own life, so I'm just sort of simplifying and waiting for a more aligned moment for that series. I do have a complete series on Pluto aspects. In each class, I taught the meaning of Pluto in aspect to each individual planet. This is available for free on this YouTube channel. Lastly, soon I'm going to be opening enrollment for a Planets That Square the Nodes year-long series. This is something I've been wanting to teach for a very long time, a very exciting topic to me with a lot of depth and wisdom and meaning. So stay tuned to that. To receive news of my current offerings, classes, events, you can sign up in my mailing list below. All right, let's jump into today's teaching. Let's start by taking a look at just the flow of this transit. It happens in three parts, and really each square is like its own ecosystem. It just covers a very different kind of vibe and has its own nature to it. There are different players involved each time. So the first square happens in a couple months. Soon Saturn's about to station retrograde in Pisces, and they meet in the mid-teens. And you see here Mars is with Jupiter, and actually Venus even joins to complete a T-square with these planets. Now Jupiter stations retrograde in Gemini, and they move together to again square each other at the very end of this year, beginning of next in the early teens. And this is actually just after Saturn stations direct at the very end of Jupiter's retrograde time. Now, the third square is really interesting. Watch Saturn. So by February of 2025, Saturn's actually back to where it is right now at the time of this video. The nodes are in Virgo, Pisces. So Jupiter will actually square Saturn at 1 degree Cancer, 1 degree Aries. What's also really interesting is just towards the end of this final square, before that square, Jupiter squares the nodes in Virgo, Pisces, and squares Neptune on that Pisces Aries cusp. And that's a very powerful and engaging, active experience. So each one of these squares is a world to unpack. Naturally, I'm going to be giving attention to the first square and just kind of unpacking what's going on there. But before I do that, it would be really helpful to take a step back and just speak to what does it mean for Jupiter and Saturn to be squaring each other? And what is the meaning of this square happening in general in Pisces and in Gemini? How do we understand that? So we can really understand that this Jupiter-Saturn cycle corresponds to essential development and cultivation of sustainable long-term growth in our lives, right? Saturn is the ground. It's where we're disciplining ourselves. It's where we're anchoring consciousness, which is kind of infinite and all over the place. It doesn't have any defined form or direction other than the parameters that we create for it intentionally with our lives. Saturn speaks to the nature of conditioning. We have our social conditioning, that which we've inherited, that which we've learned from society. And then we have the conscious conditioning that we choose to cultivate, right? Choosing to condition our posture so that we're more aligned. Conditioning that we practice is repeated and it creates a ground, sort of a groove in the record. And it says our mind, our thoughts, our ways of being are being entrained or habituated to orient in a particular direction. That's incredibly necessary or helpful for achieving anything long term. It's also a little bit of an issue if we're looking at patterns that are learned or inherited and unhelpful or shame-oriented ideas that are also being conditioned. So there's an intrinsic process in healing Saturn work that involves very often becoming aware of conditioned thoughts, conditioned patterns that have kind of got us stuck in certain ways, right? So we can begin to unravel that and say, I don't have to be that way, or I'm not a bad person, or I can explore this, and learn and cultivate new ways. But oftentimes, in order to do that, we really have to face these sort of deeper, more ingrained beliefs of right and wrong and bad and good and shame and appropriate and not appropriate, all those kinds of things. There's an essential quality of cultivating a self-authority within Saturn, which says, in the end of the day, I can't be determining the quality and the value and the direction of my life and what I'm committing to long-term, what I'm cultivating, according to what my projection of external authority says I'm supposed to be or supposed to do. It has to come from within. I have to commit myself. And we can learn, and we do learn, and we should learn from those who came before, but it needs to be a wisdom and an insight that we grow and that we develop. And so a part of the Saturn journey, and as we cultivate this self-authority, is both failing, like, I tried to do it my own way and I didn't listen to good advice, or I didn't understand right use of boundaries, or I didn't study before the test and I didn't sleep well and I partied all night and now I failed. So we learn through experience how to be more mature. But also what comes with the Saturn learning is to not be so identified with external ideas of doing it well, doing it right. It's like, I just care about the plaque or the name or the status or the getting good grades. But actually caring about the content, the personal growth, the personal achievements, who we're becoming, how we're shaping our own character, the kind of person we're becoming in life. And that's like the trap of Saturn in general, right? We can become very disciplined or very structured or very goal-oriented and work very hard, but it can be towards a goal without any real meaningful content on the inside. It's just some sense of, I'm successful now, or I'm doing good, or I'm being a good person, or I'm saying all the right things, or I'm being what a spouse is supposed to be, I'm being the parent that I'm supposed to be, or this is what it looks like to do a good job, all of those things. So there's like a richness when we look at anything relating to Saturn as it comes to really learning how to orient from the inside out. But doing that in a way where we're also recognizing others have walked this path before. Others have juggled jobs and families and success, and they've done it in personally meaningful ways. You can say the measure of success with Saturn is fulfilling social obligations and roles in a way that is simultaneously enriching an internal gauge that says, this is who I want to be. This is the person I want to be. I'm living in alignment with my own ethics, and the structural reality that I'm creating here resonates with my soul. I'm not losing my soul or suppressing or repressing something for the sake of some external notion of success. But it also says success means I'm willing to embrace limitations. I'm willing to make commitment. I'm willing to work hard and be consistent relative to the necessary growth that only consistency and discipline will bring me to. Because without that, we don't get anywhere. So Saturn itself corresponding to the root chakra, which also shares rulership with other planets, but on this level, it's like the bone, it's the structure, it's the ground. So we want to feel like we're grounded. We're not always struggling with paying the bills, getting places on time, working with basic human relational boundaries. Like Saturn is, get the structural reality of your life grounded so you're moving in a useful and meaningful direction long term. So do you see how rich that is? Like the Saturn work brings an immense amount of self-awareness. We can get our life grounded, doing work, but it can be empty and depressing and meaningless, right? So there can be a lot of depression and emptiness on the inside Or we can think, I'm free, I'm doing what I want to do, but we're struggling all the time. It's always a struggle. We're always struggling to make it on a root chakra level, right? So there's an immense amount of self-awareness to build a successful, grounded life, functional life in this world that feels authentic to our own soul being. Okay. So always tracking Saturn. Now, Saturn's going to be stationing retrograde next week. So whenever Saturn stations retrograde, that's always a very relevant theme. And I'll probably make another video about that, really zeroing in on the meaning of the Saturn in Pisces in particular. But everything I said just now is relevant. When Saturn stations retrograde, that quality of introspection, what am I committing to? What's my long-term orientation? How am I conditioning my reality long-term? What's really worth committing to? Where do I need to become more self-aware and reflective of conditioning and patterns that kind of need to unravel a little bit? Okay. Enter Jupiter. Jupiter has nothing to do with discipline. It has nothing to do implicitly on its own with long-term growth. It does have a lot to do with a mindset and a sort of attitude towards life. It's about the pilgrimage and the spiritual journey of life and learning and realization. It says, there's something good here. I'm going to learn it. There are opportunities to embrace, experiences to have. So seeing this journey as a pilgrimage that says, I'm here to learn. I'm here to realize more of the truth. I want to know my place in the cosmos. I want to connect with something more meaningful that says I'm here for a purpose. I'm here for a reason. I'm here to actualize and meet some greater potential. And I'm going to follow my intuitive guidance to pursue that. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go on that journey. I'm going to do this thing. We take those leaps of faith, so to speak, with Jupiter because life promises growth and expansion, and we want to risk it. We want to do new things to expand the framework of our reality. Jupiter is also going to speak to how we interpret our experiences, our cosmological framework through which on this journey, we're going to continually expand our understanding of what this is all about. Like, what's the point of life? Why are we here? What is this all about? On its own, Jupiter can be a flash in the pan. It can be. Let's use the metaphor of, having a deep spiritual experience, attending a plant ceremony, right? Psychedelics or a deep meditation retreat, and all the possible examples. There's an experience of realization, right? Seeing more of the truth. You get it. And it's an authentic experience. But then what? What do? I'm going to write a book about it. I'm going to tell everyone about my experience. I'm going to start a religion. More often than not, this is like the same idea of people, I feel like I'm supposed to buy a lottery ticket. Okay, go for it. You win the lottery. You felt it, right? You had that intuitive hunch. Then what? Most people, after winning the lottery, they just go back to where they were before because Saturn. We have a thermostat that sets the bar for the structural reality that we're conditioned, that we're habituated, the posture of life that we've conditioned. So we have these peak experiences, this growth, these realizations, these moments, but how do you make it livable and workable long term in your life? And that's where the wisdom, the groundedness of Saturn is absolutely necessary. There are many astrologers that speak to the phasal relationship and the cycles of Saturn and Jupiter that speak to many different, even economics and cycles of growth and developments on all levels. I want to speak about it in terms of our own spiritual growth, the realization of our potential and our purpose, and kind of what we're grounding and establishing here on this soul journey. I think of this as a soul school. We're here to experience the nuance and the intricacies of this human experience as a vehicle, as a template for our ongoing realization. And that ongoing realization doesn't look the same for everyone. We're going to be having different goals and trying on different things, but we're all in this school, and we're all in this school together. And so I like thinking of the Saturn-Jupiter interface as these are powerful moments, powerful opportunities to take all of our wisdom, all of our learning, all of our realizations, and ground it into discipline and long-term growth. In a sense, And you can think of this in your own natal chart. Where's your Saturn? Where's your Jupiter? What's their relationship with each other? And they don't have to be in an aspect, right? There's a whole series that I've been doing with the Association of Evolutionary Astrologers on planetary phases. All planets are in a relationship with each other, right? It doesn't have to be in an aspect. So just understanding these 8 phases as one modality for thinking of it is very helpful. You can gain a lot of insight by contemplating the position of each of these planets in your own chart and in transit to ask the question, how am I grounding and crystallizing my personal intuitive vision and potential and the expanded ongoing scope of realization into something that I can sustain long term? How do I make it livable? This is kind of where, just think about the flow of the zodiac. You have Sagittarius that comes before Capricorn. You can think of it as this. Archetype, and of course Jupiter rules Sag and Saturn rules Capricorn. In Sag, you're developing your cosmology. You're going to the ashram, you're, working with your teacher, you're studying business, you're going to that law school, you're cultivating greater wisdom and knowledge of natural law in whatever areas of life. And in Capricorn, it's grounded into something that can be integrated and workable and livable in your life in society, right? It's like you have the peak experience on top of the mountain in Sagittarius. You come down the mountain and you say, here are the 10 commandments, guidelines to live by. So it's like Jupiter, 9th house Sag, is like the lawyer. Lawyer meaning an understanding of the law, the ability to argue it or prove it. Whereas 10th house Capricorn Saturn is the judge, right? You're actually executing it and ruling it. You're making a judgment and sort of defining and upholding the parameters of right living in this world. So the natural relationship between these 2 archetypes speaks so much to the grounding and the crystallization of our greater realizations. Of course, we see in society, we have all these issues, like all these isms, all these like spiritual beliefs and constructs that become very judgmental and limiting by their own nature. So the key and the tension with Saturn Jupiter is to both have the adequate level of discipline and self-wisdom and self-authority and a sort of internal quiet reflectiveness to make certain commitments and embrace thus limitations, but to not become so conservative or inflexible that we end up inhibiting what's a sort of spontaneity and freshness that's needed in order to continue to learn and grow. Like once something becomes a religion, it becomes stuck. And it's harder for most people to continue to feel like the richness and the aliveness, the vibrancy of present moment realization. And we never want to suppress and kind of contort and box in this Jupiter energy. Jupiter needs to feel like the world is a wide open road, free and open for experience. So we can have that wide openness. We can feel that life is this expanded journey, but we can do that without being such a restless seeker. We can do that with some ground, with some clarity. And that's so good, right? We like Jupiter, Saturn aspects. We like it when they get into these new phases because while it might be challenging, kind of push a little more stress and growth, it's so helpful, right? It really allows for so much more integration and clarity. Okay, so with that said, let's tune into the specific placement of these planets. Jupiter in Gemini, we've spoken a lot about that. This is, of course, taking this journey of realization and seeing it from the angle of there's more detail, more nuance, more perspectives. There are journeys and places and conversations and languages and tastes that are really, really relevant to your soul growth. So the Jupiter in Gemini is the epitome, is the essence of opening the mind. And I've spoken before that, a big part of this Jupiter in Gemini journey, as it goes direct and retro and direct again, the north node of Uranus will be right at the midpoint. And that's a very powerful point that speaks like our collective evolution in sharing global knowledge and information and how we're expanding our minds in a larger sense. So this Jupiter in Gemini is a great expansion of mind, expansion of thought. And I would say on the most basic level, in sort of the more personal dimension of our own lives, however we are thinking of our lives, like the story, the narrative, the book that we have in our mind about our soul journey, it hasn't yet completed. And it's likely that the author of that book, that story that you tell yourself in the mind, hasn't done enough research, doesn't see all of the pictures. So it's good to kind of keep the pages a little bit blank and to have some humility and openness and say, there's more for me to see here. As I simplify all the extra ideas and thoughts and beliefs and things that I don't need, things I don't need to be reading, things I don't need to be thinking, and I just kind of connect with what feels intuitively relevant, I begin to align more and more where the felt sense of where the path is. We want to feel like, this is the article I'm meant to be reading. This is the video I'm meant to be watching. This is the person I'm here to work with. A sense of relevancy. Truth with Jupiter is undisputable. You know it. You feel it. It's a sense of, yes, this is exactly where, who, what I'm meant to be doing with, experiencing. One more thing with Jupiter and Gemini, just in terms of the restlessness, like all these options, all these possibilities, right? This is where the flash in the pan of Jupiter can become a huge issue. Because there are a lot of options. Like if I think about all of the events happening within a 10-mile radius of where I live, I could theoretically try to structure everything and make it work for my family to attend everything, and that would be very ungrounding. I would probably feel very exhausted, and that's the issue with Jupiter and Gemini. Seeking a lot of experience because it all tastes interesting. It's all very curious. I don't want to miss out. Kind of Jupiter and Gemini is sort of the master of FOMO, fear of missing out. We want to translate and reorient that FOMO towards I'm excited for the richness of what I haven't yet learned. And if there's anxiety, if there's like, oh, should I do that? Should I go there? Slow down. You don't have to go there. You don't have to do it. What's relevant will show up as long as it's relevant for you. I want to say that again. What is relevant and helpful and needed for our soul journey will present itself for as long as it's needed. Opportunities that come and go will come back if it's relevant. You can trust the timing of these cycles for that. If there's that anxiety and that sense of, I don't want to miss out, this is where Saturn can be very helpful. Because Saturn says, who do you want to be anyway? Like, what are you here for? What's your goal? And it brings in that greater reflectiveness. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to go on this journey? Why am I scrolling? Why am I reading this article? Why am I spending all of my mental energy doing this? Why am I having this conversation? So Saturn in Pisces is really powerful in the sense that it's really about structuring our consciousness, which can go anywhere, right? With respect to truth, with respect to unconditional love. It says this world that we're living in, the entirety of our human life, what's it for? What's its meaning? Does it have meaning? Right? You can just wake up and go to your job or spend your day partying, doing things, but that Saturn in Pisces, like what's the meaning of all of this? What am I living for? What am I doing with my life? And so there are two expressions of Saturn in Pisces that I want to highlight here. One can be a total lack of boundaries, Pisces being lack of discrimination, right? So anything goes. I'll go here, I'll do, sure. And in that lack of discrimination, we're going to find ourselves conditioning ourselves, structuring our consciousness according to wherever the water flows, according to circumstance. Take this, eat that, do this. It's no boundaries. And our relationship to ethics might be very vague. Sure, I'll say yes to this. Oh, sure, I want to be included. I don't want to have boundaries. I don't want to exclude anything or anyone. I don't want to say no. So the boundaries of Saturn and Pisces can be very weak. And Saturn in Pisces doesn't say don't have boundaries. It says allow your boundaries and the structural reality that you're creating to have meaning. Pisces says meaning. Life has meaning, but we need to want that meaning. We need to orient ourselves to that meaning. And our entire time-space experience can be completely meaningless and sort of chaotic and anarchistic, void of any sort of purpose, or we can give it meaning. We can orient it towards a sort of spiritual discernment. What am I doing with my time? So this dimension is learning to embrace boundaries. If I wake up in the morning and I don't use that time thoughtfully and consciously, I'm not going to grow. What's my goal in life? What's my spiritual goal? What's meaningful to me? And we have to kind of search that within ourselves, right? We're all going to find our relationship to the Pisces, whatever this is, to life, meaning, truth, in our own way. And it's our own responsibility to sort of connect with, am I living that inspiration? Am I living a life that connects me with something that's greater than my own making, that brings meaning and purpose into my life? Because if I'm not, it's not going to just be given to me, right? Saturn in Pisces can be the naivety of a child. Saturn is a child and an elder. It's developmental. We grow and we learn. We become that elder if we grow and learn. It can be the child expecting, oh, it's all going to work out. But then you get older, life happens, you age, responsibilities come in, and you realize, wow, I'm not where I thought I would be. Life is hard. There's a lot more suffering than I thought there would be. I'm running out of time. And that induces a gravity of awareness and reflectiveness. If I don't begin to sort of discipline and structure and commit myself to greater purpose, it's not going to be given to me. God, so to speak, isn't going to come and save me if I'm not putting in the work to actually elevate my consciousness and structure more ground and stability. So that's one dimension. The other dimension is kind of from the other angle. If you have a situation where there's too much rigidity, too much structure, form and time and space kind of took the place of God, took the place of love, took the place of meaning. This is like the example of sitting in a monastery, and you wake up every day and you do your meditation, do your practice, and you've been living there for 60 years and you're doing everything right, but is it meaningful? Like, are you actually getting anywhere? I'm doing all the right things, but what's happening on the inside? Or a more mundane example, right? You're a good citizen. You're doing good. You're a member of the local church or synagogue or, first aid committee, and you do volunteer at the kitchen. You make sure you have food on the plate for your kids and for your family, and, you do all the right things. But there can be a deep void where it's like all form and it looks good, but there might be emptiness, a deep emptiness on the inside. So a Saturn in Pisces can also be like this retreat from the world that you've been living in, leaving the world behind and turning within and looking for something more meaningful. So both of these expressions, both the need to create more ground and structure, but maybe also deconditioning from where structure has kind of gotten in the place of spirit, are two fundamental facets of Saturn and Pisces. And fundamentally within the core of all of it is, what are we doing to make our life meaningful? What are we doing long-term to connect and actually experience the success of living a life in alignment with something greater and more meaningful that gives purpose to our life? Purpose from a Pisces point of view is, there's only one purpose. Right? We didn't create ourselves. We didn't create reality. The only real meaningful purpose is being, and we can frame this in different ways, because Pisces doesn't really know how to be framed. It's you can't really frame it. So from a Sagittarian point of view, it's like you can think of it as doing God's will, or becoming an agent or an instrument of oneness, or knowing how love wants to live and express through me in my life, and devoting our life to experience that and live that and ground that as the most important thing. So that's a big part of what Saturn in Pisces is all about. Now, here are some of the dynamic tensions that you can find with Saturn in Pisces squaring Jupiter in Gemini. Of course, it can really highlight the party all night and party all day, go to have all these cool experiences, many opportunities, but then kind of being lost. And that Saturn in Pisces will be like, wow, I don't even know what I'm doing with all of this. So it says there might be an expansion of realization, and there will be. Jupiter in Gemini really emphasizes that. But we're going to have to allow for some limitations in our life to actually put in the work long term to make that livable. And I think what's beautiful about the Jupiter-Saturn phase, in particular the square, is the tension of not being where we want to be can really induce sort of the wisdom and the self-awareness that allows us to see what's needed. Like, this is what I got to do. This is the commitments that I need to make. This is the work that I need to put in. The other dimension to this square is where life is wanting to open up the doors and lead us in paths and directions that we haven't seen before, but we're afraid to. We're afraid to open our mind because of an existing shame or guilt that says, oh, that's not okay. a sort of like purity or puritanical nature that doesn't want to break the mold of the structures that we're living. So there might be an invitation for forgiveness here, which says, be open to other perspectives, right? Be open to getting out of the box, right? That example of someone that's sort of living that day-to-day life and doing all the right thing, but not feeling a deeper sense of meaning. There needs to be a sort of forgiveness to recognize, I believe that if I do this, or I think this, or if I include this element in my life, or this communication, or open my mind to this idea, then everything's going to fall apart. Everything's going to become anarchistic. It won't. But there will be a rearranging of experience and form. There won't be anarchy here, right? Especially if you're coming from that place of wanting to make sure everything's okay. Your own integrity won't allow for all the basics to fall apart. What might be needed is to kind of let go of a lot of the restrictiveness and the fear and the shame so that life can open doors to new pathways that will allow for much more sustainable and meaningful and enriching long-term growth. I mean, imagine, someone that's working, a corporate job, but they're an artist at heart. Jupiter and Gemini is like, here's a convention to go to, or, start an Instagram account, something that we're called to. And we'll have to give it time. We'll have to put time into these new endeavors and experiences, into cultivating our craft, or into doing our writing, or getting our message out. Or if we want to study something and achieve a certain goal, we have to put time into it. We're not going to change the structure of our life unless we really commit to giving time and energy to our inspirations and what we really want to cultivate and develop in our life. In my current year training program, what I'm loving about it is I'm seeing a group of people that are really devoted and committed to their studies. Like, there's a core group of people that are doing the assignments every week. And this is like a Jupiter Saturn thing. It's like the Jupiter's like, oh, I want to take this course, right? Most people get involved in a course or a training program or an experience, or they go into a gym, right? I'm going to do a gym. And it fizzles out. It's just how it goes. We start things, people start YouTube channels, and it fizzles out. But to realize, to actually get somewhere with it, I'm going to have to be consistent. That's the key here. One other thing that I want to say, just kind of highlighting in general the tension and the beauty and the amazingness of the Jupiter-Pisces interface. We understand that Jupiter, that Gemini speaks to our empirical ordering of reality, right? So we come at it from a sense of, I don't really understand what all of this is about. Especially when we're children, there's no understanding of the interconnectedness. There's a very plastic mind here that's open to learning. And we approach an ever-increasing holistic understanding of reality through the logical ordering of the mind. We learn something new, it expands our intellectual framework, and we get it more. We see the interconnectedness of it all more, right? But we never arrive at the oneness, right? Like Jupiter never, Gemini never arrives at Pisces. Gemini will always ever be approaching a more holistic broadening of understanding in particular streams that are relevant for our own learning, like where we're oriented and guided to kind of learn and continue our development. That's what Gemini and Mercury in the third house are essentially about. But we're never, ever going to be able to understand one topic in its entirety because one topic is never in a vacuum. There's always more to learn, and thus there's always more data. All topics which are created are ultimately interconnected. So we can't like take the mind apart and then put it back together through Gemini and get all of it. That's the tension between Gemini and Pisces. It says there's a certain mystery here. You can't comprehend this. And from the point of view of there being like a greater intelligence, like a greater plan, a greater unfolding of the Tao, Pisces, that knows all of it, it has the picture of it all. It's like the oneness knows, and we can trust its guidance and its movement, its flow. We are going to get parts of it and be able to brilliantly map and understand dimensions of the journey, but never get there in its entirety. And it's really important to understand that because that teaches a sort of humility and surrender where the tension can be that like, I don't understand. It's like, that's okay. Especially with Jupiter and Gemini, Jupiter itself, which wants that sort of right brain synthesis, and that Gemini is like trying to gather more data to piece it all together. It's really helpful to just kind of quiet down. It's okay to not know. The book that you haven't read yet is quite complex. It's actually so beautiful that it's like every single one of us is in the book. It's so interwoven that we can trust the journey and enjoy reading it, enjoy the process, enjoy the present moment edge of learning and experiencing something new. One more dimension to speak to with this, the square between Pisces and Gemini, we can find ourselves coming to a point where we become sort of like an instrument where our minds are used to convey knowledge, ideas, concepts, teachings, explanations that will reach the masses, right? We can have these moments of profound comprehension where it all just like lands, like you're studying, and suddenly there are these grounded, clear visions and insights. The astronomy and the astrology and the psychology all make sense. So the ability to logically and linearly explain the interconnectedness between things can be very enhanced and grounded here. It's also the ability to speak these higher ideas or spiritual teachings or concepts or hard, complex, logical ideas in ways that can be clearly articulated step by step. It's like, teaching an instruction, teaching a course, and you're writing the book, and you're explaining these very complex ideas, but you're grounding it in a very practical, step-by-step linear way so it can be digested and understood at all different levels of comprehension or consciousness, right? This happens because of essentially Gemini relative to Pisces speaks to the mind becoming an instrument for meaning. So whatever we're here to learn, whatever we're here to say, whatever exchange of knowledge and communication we're here to engage in, the oneness is guiding that. And we can find ourselves landing upon just really beautiful insights and brilliant understanding that just like makes it all make sense now. And I think a key to cultivating that is, one, not arriving before we get there, like Jupiter and Gemini, being open to learning, being open to the journey, and being willing to put in the long-term work so that our life can really be this embodiment of greater wisdom, greater purpose, and we can contribute something that feels really relevant and authentic to who we are and who we want to become. So with that said, let's just briefly take a look at the first of these squares just to get a sense of the energetics of this first phase. So they come into the first square in mid-August, and we see here Mars is with Jupiter, and Venus is also coming to create a T-square with Saturn and Mars and Jupiter. The ruler of all of this Gemini is Mercury at the first part of its retrograde journey, moving towards its midpoint with the Sun. So this is very mentally stimulating. It's almost as if there's just a lot going on right there. The phase moving into that, especially once Mars enters Gemini, speaks to the introduction of many new themes. Mars is going to make this very real. Mars is very instigating, it's very engaging, it's a very present moment. Here's the content. What are you going to say? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? How are you going to respond? So there's a lot of stimulation, a lot of mental activation happening right now. So we see this first square, and I would say just the next 2 to 3 months, as Saturn's moving retrograde, and they're moving into and just beyond this first square, is this greater introspection and reflection on, oh, here's new ideas, new angles, new perspectives, and it might feel like there's a lot coming in, new thoughts, new ways of engaging. And especially with this retrograde happening of Mercury in Leo, how am I going to actualize all of this? How am I going to give creative meaning and direction and purpose to my life right now? It's definitely opening up the doors to begin thinking of ourselves in a new way. I think it's going to be very interesting and a very strong introduction to this year-long transit. All right, as always, thank you so much for watching.